James McKinnon knew something was wrong when his horses wouldn't stop screaming. 20 years in the Marines hadn't dulled his instincts. If anything, retirement had sharpened them. The Montana night was usually quiet, save for the occasional coyote, but tonight the air crackled with an energy that made his skin prickle. He grabbed his rifle and flashlight, more out of habit than necessity. The full moon cast enough light to turn his wheat fields into a silver ocean. As he approached the stable, a sound unlike anything he'd ever heard cut through the darkness, a cross between a wounded bear's growl and the screech of tearing metal. The horses had broken free, trampling paths through his crops as they fled. James followed their trail, his boots crunching against frost-covered wheat. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees in the last hour, and his breath came out in visible puffs. That's when he saw it, a trench carved into his field, still smoking. The ground around it was crystallized, like glass, and at its center lay something that defied explanation. At first glance, it looked like a fallen star, but as James approached, the mass shifted and unfurled. Scales the color of midnight oil caught the moonlight, refracting it into impossible colors. Wings, each easily 30 feet across, trembled as the creature tried to rise. Its head, serpentine yet noble, turned toward him with eyes that glowed like distant galaxies. A dragon, not the kind from fairy tales or Chinese mythology, this was something else entirely. Its body was covered in what looked like organic armor, with patches that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Where it bled, the fluid glowed silver. "Well," James muttered, lowering his rifle, "this is new." The dragon's eyes fixed on him, and James felt a presence brush against his mind. Not words exactly, but emotions, images, pain, fear, urgency. Something was hunting it. As if in response to that thought, a high-pitched whine filled the air. James looked up to see 3 black shapes cutting through the clouds, their outlines too angular to be any aircraft he recognized. The dragon's fear spiked, broadcasting panic into James's mind. 20 years of combat experience kicked in. "Don't move," he commanded, though he wasn't sure if the dragon could understand him. He sprinted back to his barn, returning with a heavy tarp used for covering hay bales. The pursuing crafts were getting closer, their searchlights sweeping the ground. Working quickly, James covered the dragon's massive form. Its scales seemed to respond, dimming their glow. He scattered some loose hay over the tarp, then stepped back to survey his work. In the darkness, it looked like nothing more than another hay pile. The searchlights passed overhead. James stood casually in his field, waving at the crafts as they flew by. To anyone watching, he was just a farmer checking his crops at night, a common enough sight in these parts. Minutes stretched into an hour before the crafts finally disappeared over the horizon. Only then did James pull back the tarp. The dragon's eyes met his, and this time the mental contact carried something new: gratitude. "Don't mention it," James said, then laughed at the absurdity of the situation. "Though I have to say, this beats the hell out of the usual cattle breaking into my fields." The dragon's mental touch became more focused, more intentional. Images flowed into James's mind. A vast war among the stars, a species hunted to near extinction, a desperate flight across galaxies. This wasn't just any dragon, it was a refugee. And those ships belonged to the ones who had driven its kind to the brink of annihilation. James ran a hand through his graying hair. He'd seen enough war to last several lifetimes, had watched good people die in conflicts they barely understood. Something in this creature's story resonated with old wounds, old regrets. "Listen," he said, meeting those ancient eyes, "I've got a reinforced storm cellar that should hide your energy signature, whatever that is. Can you move?" The dragon struggled to its feet. Its movements were graceful despite its injuries, like a dancer performing through pain. It followed James with surprising stealth for something its size, leaving barely a footprint in the frost-covered earth. As James led the dragon to safety, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to become considerably more complicated. He joined the Marines seeking adventure, only to find purpose in protecting others. Now, decades later, that same purpose had found him again, this time with scales and wings. The storm cellar doors groaned as he opened them. "It's not the Ritz," he said, "but it's got good bones and better secrets." The dragon ducked its massive head and descended into the darkness. As James closed the doors, he heard distant engines returning. "Well," he muttered, heading back to his house, "tomorrow's gonna be interesting." He had no idea just how right he was. Dawn broke over the Montana plains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. James McKinnon sat at his kitchen table, nursing his third cup of coffee and wondering if last night had been some elaborate dream. The crater in his wheat field suggested otherwise. A gentle tremor ran through the ground. His guest was stirring. James grabbed the medical kit he'd assembled and headed to the storm cellar. Inside, the dragon's bioluminescent markings provided enough light to see by, casting everything in an ethereal blue glow. "Morning," James said, setting down the kit. "Hope you don't mind, but I've got questions." The dragon's consciousness touched his mind, more controlled now. Images and concepts flowed like water, a name Varaxis, last of the stellar archivists, a civilization that had once spanned galaxies, preserving knowledge across the cosmos. Then came darker images, the hegemony, a coalition of species that feared the dragon's power to access and share memories across vast distances. The war that followed, the extinction. "So you're basically a living library," James said, applying antiseptic to one of Varaxis's wounds. The dragon's blood shimmered like liquid starlight. "And they wanted to burn the books." Affirmative, but there was more. The hegemony hadn't just feared the dragon's abilities, they feared what the dragons had discovered. Ancient technologies, forgotten truths, secrets that could reshape the balance of power across the universe. "And now they're here," James muttered, "on Earth." A new series of images filled his mind. Earth was considered a quarantine zone by galactic standards. Too primitive to be a threat, too resource-rich to ignore completely. The perfect hiding place until now. James was about to respond when his phone buzzed. Text from his neighbor, Tom Bradley. "Military convoy heading your way. Black vehicles, no markings." "Well, that didn't take long." James started gathering his supplies. "How mobile are you?" Varaxis rose, wings folded tight against its body. The wounds were healing rapidly, scales knitting together with crystalline precision. But flight wasn't an option yet. The hegemony's ships would detect the energy signature instantly. The sound of vehicles approaching echoed from above. James climbed the cellar stairs and peered out. 5 black SUVs were rolling up his driveway, kicking up dust clouds in their wake. Men in dark suits emerged, led by a woman whose posture screamed career intelligence. James straightened his jacket and stepped out to meet them, deliberately leaving his rifle inside. 20 years of military service had taught him when to appear harmless. "Mr. McKinnon," the woman flashed a badge. "I'm Director Carson, Defense Intelligence Agency. We detected some unusual atmospheric phenomena in this area last night." "Ma'am," James nodded, channeling his best confused farmer expression. "Saw some lights in the sky if that's what you mean. Figured it was one of those meteor showers." "Mind if we take a look around?" "Not at all, though I should mention I've got paperwork from the VA about unauthorized surveillance of veterans' property." He smiled pleasantly. "Interesting reading." Director Carson's eyes narrowed slightly. "We're not here to surveil, Mr. McKinnon. We're investigating a potential threat to national security." "On my wheat farm?" James chuckled. "Unless you're worried about my tomatoes going rogue, I think we're safe." One of the suits whispered something in Carson's ear, holding up a device that blinked rapidly. She frowned. "Your property is showing some unusual energy readings." "That be the experimental solar panels the DOE installed last year," James lied smoothly. "Part of their veteran sustainability program, generates all kinds of weird signatures." He could see Carson weighing her options. Push harder and risk a political incident with a decorated veteran, or back off and maintain surveillance from a distance. "Here's my card," she said finally. "If you notice anything unusual, call immediately." "Will do, Director, though out here unusual is pretty much Tuesday." James watched them leave, maintaining his friendly farmer facade until the last vehicle disappeared in a cloud of dust. Only then did he let out a long breath and head back to the cellar. Varaxis's mental touch carried concern. The dragon had sensed something about the visitors. They weren't just human intelligence. Some of them had technology far too advanced for Earth. "The hegemony's already got people on the inside," James concluded, "which means we can't trust official channels." He began packing, old tactical instincts kicking in. "We need a plan, and we need allies." New images flowed from Varaxis, other dragons scattered across Earth in hiding. A network of refugees maintaining radio silence waiting for a signal. Hope wasn't lost, it was just buried deep. How many? Dozens, maybe more, each carrying fragments of knowledge that could change everything or destroy it all if the hegemony got their hands on it. James checked his phone. More messages from Tom. Satellite vans setting up on the county road, unmarked helicopters doing sweeps of the area. "They're not going to give up," he said, "and sooner or later they'll find a way to detect you." He looked at Varaxis, seeing not just a dragon but a guardian of knowledge, a survivor of a war most humans couldn't imagine. "So let's change the game." Varaxis's eyes gleamed with interest. The mental connection strengthened, sharing not just images now but strategies, possibilities. "First," James said, "we need to get you mobile. Then we find the others, and then—" He smiled grimly. "Then we teach the hegemony why picking a fight on human territory was a very bad idea." The dragon's approval rumbled through the cellar like distant thunder. Above them, storm clouds were gathering, nature's own camouflage for what was to come. The war that had nearly ended among the stars was about to be reborn in the wheat fields of Montana. And this time, the dragons weren't fighting alone. The old mining tunnel hadn't seen use since the 1950s, but it was about to host the most unusual gathering in Montana history. James McKinnon checked his watch as he set up the last battery-powered lamp. Behind him, Varaxis's scales rippled with anticipation, casting shifting patterns on the rock walls. "You sure about this?" James asked, though he already knew the answer. 3 days of careful planning had led to this moment. Through Varaxis's psychic network, they'd contacted other hidden dragons and their human allies. Tonight, they would meet. The first arrival was Dr. Alina Wright, a quantum physicist who'd retired from DARPA 5 years ago. She emerged from her battered Jeep looking exactly like what she was, a brilliant scientist who'd seen too much to stay quiet. "Interesting company you keep, McKinnon," she said, nodding toward Varaxis. Her own companion emerged from the shadows, a smaller dragon with scales like burnished copper. "This is Nyxis. She found me when they tried to shut down my research into interdimensional energy signatures." Others arrived in quick succession. Marcus Rodriguez, an ex-Navy SEAL turned wilderness guide, accompanied by a forest-green dragon named Kestris. Hannah Chen, a teenage hacker prodigy whose dragon partner, Luminax, had saved her from government agents after she uncovered their alien communications network. Each dragon was unique, each human story different, but they shared a common thread. They'd all stumbled upon the truth and chosen to protect it. "The hegemony's moving faster than we thought," Alina announced, spreading satellite photos across a makeshift table. "They're building something in the desert. Energy readings are off the charts." James studied the images. A weapon. Varaxis's mental voice touched them all now, sharing knowledge. Not a weapon, a beacon. The hegemony was preparing to call in their main fleet, hidden beyond the solar system's edge. "How long?" Marcus asked. 2 weeks, maybe less," Alina replied. "Once that beacon activates, Earth becomes a staging ground for their invasion. They'll have all the excuse they need to implement full quarantine protocols." Hannah's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. "I've been tracking their communications. They're already positioning assets. Look at these personnel transfers into key military and government positions." The images she pulled up showed familiar faces with subtle wrongness, human-looking beings with too perfect features. Hegemony infiltrators, wearing bioengineered disguises. "They're preparing for resistance," Marcus noted, "but they're thinking conventional military. They don't know about this." He gestured to their gathered group. Kestris, his dragon partner, projected an image of mountain ranges across the American West. Points of light indicated more hidden dragons, more human allies. A scattered resistance, but growing. "We need to stop that beacon," James said. "But more than that, we need to expose them. The world needs to know what's coming." "That's suicide," Alina argued. "The moment we go public, they'll implement their contingency plans, mass memory manipulation, targeted eliminations. Unless we give them something bigger to worry about." Hannah's voice was quiet but firm. "The dragons aren't just refugees, they're living databases of advanced technology. Technology the hegemony doesn't want anyone to have." Varaxis confirmed this with a series of images. Clean energy systems that could power cities, medical techniques centuries ahead of Earth's current capabilities, defense systems that could protect an entire planet. "So we don't just fight them," James said, the plan forming in his mind. We uplift humanity right under their noses, make Earth too advanced to qualify for quarantine status before they can stop us. The gathered dragons hummed in approval, their combined mental presence filling the cave with a sense of possibility. Their human partners shared looks of determination. It won't be easy, Marcus warned. The hegemonies had centuries to perfect their control systems. Good thing we've got centuries of hidden knowledge on our side, Alina replied, patting Nyxus's scales. And something they've never faced before, dragons and humans working together. Hannah was already typing. I can start distributing the tech specs through unofficial channels, make it look like multiple independent discoveries. They won't be able to suppress them all. And I've got contacts in the right media outlets, Marcus added. People who can handle the truth and know how to protect their sources. James turned to Varaxis. You said the dragons were knowledge keepers. Time to share that knowledge where it'll do the most good. The dragons' response filled their minds with images of possibility, a future where humanity reached for the stars not as primitive quarantine subjects, but as equals, partners, defenders of knowledge and freedom across the galaxies. 2 weeks, James said. 2 weeks to change the course of human history and stop an invasion. Anyone want to back out? The silence was answer enough. Around the cave, humans and dragons stood together, an impossible alliance born of necessity and hope. Then let's get to work. The hegemony thinks they're hunting scattered refugees. Time to show them they've stumbled into a hornet's nest instead. As they dispersed into the night, each with their assigned tasks, James couldn't help but smile. He'd fought in enough wars to know the look of a turning point. This wasn't just about saving the dragons anymore. It was about humanity's first real step into a larger universe. And if the hegemony thought they could keep humanity confined to their cradle forever, they were about to learn a harsh lesson about the species they'd dismissed as primitive, especially when that species had dragons on their side. The desert night was alive with energy as James McKinnon watched the hegemony's beacon facility through high-powered binoculars. Beside him, Varaxis lay camouflaged beneath a net of advanced metamaterials, courtesy of Alina's quantum engineering expertise. Security's heavier than we expected, Marcus reported, crawling up beside them. His dragon partner, Kestris, was maintaining a psychic perimeter, monitoring the thoughts of the facility's guards. They've got at least 30 proxies inside. Proxies, the hegemony's elite shock troops. Synthetic beings that looked human but could reconfigure their bodies into living weapons. James had seen footage of what one could do. 30 was an army. Hannah's in position, James asked. Marcus nodded. She and Luminax have tapped into their communications network. Once she triggers the blackout, we'll have exactly 7 minutes before their quantum backup systems kick in. 7 minutes to infiltrate a heavily guarded facility, disable an alien beacon, and upload Varaxis's data package into their mainframe. It was impossible, which, James had learned, was exactly the kind of mission that tended to work. His phone vibrated, a message from Alina. Package delivered. News networks are going live in 30. Right on schedule. Across the country, major media outlets were about to simultaneously release proof of extraterrestrial presence on Earth. Not the full truth, humanity wasn't ready for that, but enough to throw the hegemony's carefully maintained secrecy into chaos. Remember, James said, both to his human allies and the dragons linked into their mental network, we're not just stopping an invasion, we're changing the game. Varaxis's consciousness brushed against his, sharing memories of worlds that had successfully broken free from hegemony control. It had happened before. It could happen again. A subtle vibration ran through the ground Hannah's signal. The facility's lights flickered and died. Go time, James whispered. What followed was a symphony of precisely coordinated chaos. As alarm systems failed, dragons suddenly appeared in the sky above the facility, their bioluminescent patterns creating a light show that drew every eye upward. Security forces rushed to defensive positions, expecting an aerial assault. They weren't prepared for what came from below. The ground erupted as Kestris, who had spent days tunneling beneath the facility, burst through the foundation. Marcus and his team of ex-Special Forces operators poured through the breach, moving with practiced efficiency. James and Varaxis had a different route. While the chaos unfolded at ground level, they approached from the facility's blind spot, straight down the sheer cliff face behind it. Varaxis's claws found holds no human could have spotted, carrying them both with impossible silence. 5 minutes left. They breached through a maintenance hatch Aliner's team had identified. Inside, emergency lights cast everything in red shadows. Two proxies guarded the main control room. Before they could react, Varaxis projected a targeted psychic pulse, an information weapon perfected by dragons over centuries of warfare. The proxies collapsed, their synthetic brains overloaded. "Clear," James whispered, though it was unnecessary. The dragon's senses extended far beyond human limitations. 4 minutes. The control room was a maze of alien technology masquerading as human computers. James plugged in the quantum drive Hannah had prepared, while Varaxis connected directly to the system through points of crystalline contact. An alarm blared not from their intrusion, but from the news breaking across the globe. On monitors around them, they could see the hegemony's careful plans crumbling. Their human disguises were being exposed on live television. Their shadow operations were dragged into the light. 3 minutes. "We've got company," Marcus's voice crackled through the radio. "Big company." Through Varaxis's enhanced senses, James saw it, a hegemony warship decloaking above the facility. They'd forced the enemy's hand, made them reveal themselves too soon. 2 minutes. The upload was only halfway complete. Data streamed from Varaxis into the facility's quantum mainframe technical specifications for defensive systems, clean energy, medical breakthroughs. Everything humanity would need to protect itself. "James," Hannah's voice this time. "Their backup systems are adapting. I can't hold them much longer." 1 minute. The warship opened fire, not at them, but at its own facility. Better to destroy their own base than let its secrets fall into human hands. The building shook. Support beams groaned. "Upload complete," James announced, but... He looked at the final piece of data Varaxis had transferred. Not technology this time, but truth. The complete history of the hegemony's manipulation of developing worlds, their atrocities, their weaknesses. 30 seconds. "Send it," James commanded. "Send it all." Varaxis's consciousness merged with the facility's transmission array, and for a moment, James shared the dragon's perception. He felt the data surge outward, not just to human networks, but to every hegemony communication channel. Their deepest secrets, broadcast across their own secure frequencies. The ceiling began to collapse. "Time to go," Marcus shouted. James grabbed the quantum drive as Varaxis scooped him up. They burst through the disintegrating roof just as the warship's main weapon charged for a killing blow. But it never came. Other ships were arriving, not hegemony vessels, but ships of distinctly different design. The dragon's mental network hummed with recognition. Allies, civilizations that had broken free from hegemony control, waiting for this moment. As they soared away from the exploding facility, James watched the night sky come alive with the first true battle for Earth's independence. Humanity's quarantine was broken, but so was their isolation. "Think they'll ever forgive us?" he asked Varaxis, only half joking, "for turning their world upside down?" The dragon's response filled his mind with images of humanity's potential, not as passive victims or protected primitives, but as active participants in a galactic community. Partners in preserving knowledge, defenders of freedom. It wouldn't be easy. The hegemony wouldn't go quietly. But as James watched dragons and humans working together below, coordinating with alien allies above, he knew they'd made the right choice. The war for Earth was just beginning, but for the first time, it would be fought on humanity's terms. 3 months after the Battle of Montana, as the media had taken to calling it, James McKinnon stood before the newly formed United Earth Council. Varaxis loomed behind him, a living testament to how much the world had changed. The council chamber itself, hastily constructed in Geneva, reflected this new reality designed to accommodate both human and dragon representatives. "The hegemony has withdrawn from 3 more sectors," James reported, gesturing to the holographic map Alina and Nyxis had built. "Their control over their member species is fracturing. The truth about their manipulation of developing civilizations has triggered revolutions across 50 star systems." Director Carson, the real one, freed from hegemony imprisonment, leaned forward. And the infiltrators. The detection protocols Hannah and Luminax developed are working, James replied. We've identified and contained 90% of their proxies. The rest have either fled or defected. The world was still reeling from the revelations. Humanity had gone from believing they were alone in the universe to learning they were part of a vast, complex galactic community, and that they just helped spark the biggest political upheaval in 10,000 years. But they were adapting. Humans were good at that. The technology integration is proceeding ahead of schedule, Alina added from her seat. Her dragon partner, Nyxus, projected images of new developments: clean fusion reactors powering cities, pollution scrubbers cleaning the atmosphere, medical facilities using dragon-inspired regeneration techniques. Within 5 years, Earth's technological level will match or exceed hegemony standard. Assuming we survive that long, someone muttered, the concern wasn't unfounded. The hegemony had lost their grip on Earth, but they weren't defeated. Their main fleet was regrouping. That's why we're not doing this alone, Marcus responded. He and Kestris had just returned from coordinating with their new allies. The Free Worlds Coalition is providing defense support. Between their ships and our dragon-enhanced planetary shields, Earth is better protected than ever. James watched the council members process this. Some still looked shell-shocked, others determined. All of them understood the magnitude of what humanity had stumbled into. Hannah, who had become Earth's youngest tech security advisor at 17, pulled up new data. The Dragon network is picking up increased chatter. The hegemony's attempting to reorganize, but they're facing internal resistance. Seems we're not the only ones who were tired of their control. Varaxis's consciousness touched the gathering, sharing visions of possibility. The Dragon knowledge repositories weren't just about technology. They contained art, philosophy, scientific insights from civilizations that had flourished and fallen while humanity was still learning to make fire. We've been asked, James said carefully, to help establish a new galactic archive, not hidden this time but open, a place where knowledge can be shared freely. The implications were enormous. Earth, long quarantined as a primitive world, was being invited to help reshape galactic civilization. There will be opposition, Director Carson warned. Not just from the hegemony, some on Earth will resist these changes. There already is, James acknowledged. But look what we've accomplished in 3 months. He gestured to the chamber around them, humans and dragons working together, scientists unlocking the mysteries of the universe, soldiers learning to fight alongside beings they once thought were myths, diplomats establishing Earth's first interstellar treaties. The hegemony controlled through division and fear, he continued. They kept species isolated, regulated technological development, hoarded knowledge. We're offering something different. Varaxis projected images of the future they were building, a network of free worlds, each developing in their own way but united in defense of knowledge and liberty. Earth wasn't just joining the galactic community, it was helping to remake it. There's an old saying, James said, looking at each council member in turn. A dragon's greatest treasure isn't gold, it's knowledge. For centuries, the dragons guarded that treasure among the stars. Now they've shared it with us. Not because we conquered them, but because we helped them when they needed it most. The chamber was silent, absorbing the weight of his words. The hegemony thought they could keep humanity in a cage. Instead, they gave us exactly what we needed to break free, a chance to prove who we really are. Outside the chamber windows, dragons soared through the Swiss sky, their scales catching the sunset. On the ground, construction crews worked on new buildings designed to house both species. In orbit, ships from a dozen free worlds maintained their protective watch. So what's it going to be? James asked. Do we hide from this new reality, or do we embrace it and help build something better? The vote was unanimous. Later, standing on the observation deck with Varaxis, James watched the first class of human-dragon pairs training together. Alina was teaching quantum physics to eager students, while Nyxus demonstrated practical applications. Hannah and Luminax were developing new encryption protocols that merged human ingenuity with dragon memory-sharing techniques. Did you know it would turn out like this? James asked his partner. When you crashed in my field that night. Varaxis's response carried amusement and honesty. No one had known. The dragons had come to Earth seeking refuge. Instead, they'd found partners in revolution. The sun set over the Alps, casting long shadows across the changed world. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was plotting their response. But they'd lost their greatest weapon, the ability to keep worlds isolated and afraid. Knowledge once shared couldn't be caged again, and Earth, with its dragons and its determination, would make sure it never would be.